Welcome to the Irish Examiner Six Nations videocast. I have to say I'm delighted to be joined this morning by journalistic gold dust. He saw his first Five Nations match in 1959. It was Ireland against England. It took what seemed forever to get from Derry to Dublin by train at the time. He reported on his first match in the Five Nations Championship as it was in 1965, Wales against Ireland in Cardiff. He's been covering the tournament since 1975. It's rare for me to get a man who was at a Five Nations game before I was born. So, Jacko, you're more than welcome.
Thank you, Donald. Thank you.
Scott Robertson, thrilled that you could join us. I believe from you're in, where are you at the moment?
Queenstown. Yeah, down the beautiful south of.
You're in the beautiful Queenstown. Exactly, and the South Island of New Zealand. Of course, everybody knows you as the magnificent coach of the Crusaders, multiple Super Rugby talents, former New Zealand All Black, and of course, you did spend a bit of time in the French Championship playing with Perpignan. And in the red of Cork, we have our own Ronan O'Gara, who played for Cork Constitution in the All Ireland League, and maybe one or two other teams as well, like Munster Ireland, the British and Irish Lions. So, lads, delighted to see you. Jacko, I understand you're in Cardiff at the moment, and you're showing your wisdom and your knowledge there. Every book you ever bought in your life is hanging off your shelf behind you.
No, most of them, Donald, are about US presidents.
Oh.
The fascination for all things Americana.
Very impressed.
Ronan's book is somewhere there.
Ronan.
Yeah.
What about my book? Don't tell me you don't have my book.
There's another shelf in the other direction, Donald. Next time I'll have the emphasis on that.
For masterpieces, good stuff. Were you at a game, or were you watching from at home in Cardiff over the weekend?
No, I was watching, and if you feel there's a strange sound going on in the background here, it'll be the whole nation gnashing its teeth. I thought it was wonderful. Some of the rugby that Ireland played, particularly in that first 25 minutes, was breathtaking. I hesitate to say this because it sounds terribly knee-jerk, but I don't think I'd ever seen an Irish team perform, hit the angles of running, the dexterity, the tempo, the power, everything. I thought it was just excellent. And people said to me here locally, well, what do you think? I said, well, it was kind of what I expected. The one surprising aspect of the game, Donald, was that it was so one-sided. I thought Wales would do very well to restrict Ireland to 25 points, to reduce them to fewer than 4 tries. In the end, the scoreline flattered Wales, not Ireland. Ireland were probably 40 points better. That's how good I think they were.
You don't get Sky Sports on Saturday mornings in Cardiff, do you, for the last 5 years? You've never seen the Crusaders play.
No, I'm talking from an Irish point of view.
No, sorry. Right. I'm only being smart.
One, yeah.
Well, I tell you, when you mentioned that, I mean, Scott, we're waxing lyrical over here, given the way the Irish forwards are playing at the moment. Andy Farrell took over from Joe Schmidt after the 2019 World Cup. Huge disappointment with the way Ireland played, having had a brilliant year in 2018. They won a Grand Slam. They won a series down against Australia. They beat New Zealand in Dublin in 2018. You might have heard about that in New Zealand at the time. But they didn't move on. In the last 6 or 9 months, this Irish team has they're playing rugby that looks a little bit alien to us. But, if you step back, I mean, Brodie Retallick as a forward, as a handling, playmaking forward, Brodie Retallick broke the mold, if you like, in a New Zealand context a couple of years ago. Then your own, as Raj alludes to, your own Crusaders team, you won multiple Super Rugby titles, with the likes of Sam Whitelock, Scott Barrett, Cody Taylor, Nipolo Lala, all front 5 forwards, playing exactly the type of game that Ireland are trying to develop. Now, in New Zealand, was that something that you worked on for a long time? Does it help that New Zealand's forwards in general, New Zealand rugby people have incredible skill sets? But, can you just comment on that? And, are you surprised at Ireland's development in the way they've been playing the game recently?
That's a hell of a question. That's a long question, Donal. Wow. I'm going to start.
I want to make sure you're awake down there.
I'm going to cover it. Yeah, it's at the length. I'll just start off. With a little bit of my connection back to Ireland. I left school early and went and played up in County Down, so up in the north, and played for a club called Ards. And I'd always used to travel down to watch all the Five Nations games back in those days down to Dublin, and we'd spend the time, went down to Limerick. I never got far as Cork, but I've got a fond part of my memories in my heart, and probably the first time I've ever had a double chin from all the Guinness I drank in my life. But so I've got a fond memory, and I just got a feeling, when you watch the Irish game and how they played and the continuity and the cohesion, that it's all well and good, as Peter said, to have the skill set, to have the dexterity, but the clarity to be at the right place at the right time, and the timing was incredible. And I think Andy Farrell's influence, a lot of the stuff that they're doing is rugby league. The way that rugby league, 2 extra guys coming out the back door, coming late, can stop a rush defence, and it can also get you on the edge because you lose your numbers because there's 2 extra coming. And how do you beat a league defence? You beat it with league attack. And so the Irish, a lot of their stuff that you see is from obviously his league background, and the influence of Mike Cat is the
attack coach.
Yeah, attack coach. So the clarity of the roles and bringing it back to sort of Crusaders New Zealand rugby. That's how we play when we're 16, 17, 18 at high school. We all want to be backs. We all want to be Kirsten Cullen. We all want to be Tana Umanga. So it's sort of quite natural to have those ball skills. Like, I'm just not a line-out forward. I'm going to give that missed ball, that missed pass, and then you get the James Ryan and Van der Fly, who plays way heavier than he looks on the field. Geez, he can play. All of a sudden, they've been given the freedom. They look like they've got a different. Well, they have got a different mindset and a trust in each other that's got an incredible instinct. Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly brilliant to watch. Raj, from your time with the Crusaders, and now you see what Ireland are trying to do, just how impressed have you been with Ireland? Come back to November when they beat New Zealand, Argentina, Japan, and now carrying that through to the opening game in the Six Nations.
Yeah, I think... I also think it's probably been work in progress, Donal, in the fact that I think there was definitely a need for probably an expansion of their framework of their game. I think for exiting, we were obviously very frustrated with just box kicking exits. And I think there is a role for that in the game, most definitely. But you look at the weekend and they're playing passing the ball 90 meters from the opposition line. That's probably very different to what we have seen from the boys in green. But I think Razor alludes to it in the fact that there's multiple threats now. I think something that blew me away was from going into the Crusaders, probably the skill set of the front five. And I know obviously with Paulie in the Irish setup now, he would have a big emphasis on forwards being able to handle the ball and passing it with ease left to right and right to left. So I think as we've talked about, there's big trust in probably what we are doing, and they're on a roll. Is it 9 victories in a row? So things in the past that were probably challenges, now they're very easy for them to play with ball in hand, and they have obviously good kicking threats with obviously Johnny with Gibson Park from attacking kicks, and also they still have either James Lowe or Mac Hansen with the left foot option, which cannot be underestimated in Test rugby because the way defences are set up nowadays, and a lot of teams are putting 13 in the front line. So identifying space is crucial, but being able to execute the skill is just as important. I think Ireland playing it, I suppose the big difference for me is their ability to express themselves. I think they're doing that very well.
Yeah, but I think there's also a sort of a feeling, yourself, a happy camp is a group that will play well, and that was very evident. The most important thing for me that came out of the November series, I think Peter O'Mahony made a comment that was the the happiest, the most cohesive squad they had for a while. And when you consider that was in the midst of a COVID bubble, they were all locked together. They hadn't been able to, when they travel abroad, the whole thing is so restrictive. But you get this sense of kind of expression. People aren't afraid to make mistakes. They all want to express themselves. And it's been transformative. I mean, I walked down, walking to the stadium last Saturday, like there was a buzz around before the match. Obviously having huge crowds, like going to matches with nobody there for the past year has been a complete and utter disaster. When you meet the vendors, as you'd remember, going down past the old Berkeley Court, and they're stopping you, they're hugging you because they can sell their scarves and their hats, and it's back to normal. As Razor alluded to, the Guinness was flowing. There was a buzz around the place, and it's almost as if we missed it so much. And then the quality of rugby that's been playing. I mean, you know yourself, having the right environment within a group is massive. And Ireland, whatever they're doing off the field, it certainly seems to be complementing the way they're approaching things on the field.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I'll just jump in. I think the reflection of the way they defended, like sort of a defence coach background, and obviously Ronan knows a little bit about that side of the ball as well. Is just what he did a lot for us when he came over to the Crusaders, but how hard they work for each other, and a lot of the craft around the breakdown, they're good. They just hold it. They'll turn you off the breakdown. They've got great double shoulders. Their discipline's high. They like in regards to World Rugby, both sides of the ball, they're so well coached. Look, we analyse all the teams over there regularly because we're looking for a point of difference. Our game's fine margins, and we're looking for opportunities. So we notice the detail. The long edge attack and the long edge D are really big in rugby. It's how do you defend it? How do you defend the backfield in the front field? It's so hard. But the understanding, they've got props for and from the edge, defending, running up high, turning in backs. Like to do that, it's you have to have a highly cohesive team, a lot of high trust. They're right up there with World Rugby. It's really impressive, and it shows because they care about each other. They're obviously happy.
And interesting you make the point about defence, because despite all the attacking, the focus being on that, I think Andy Farrell said after the game that Ireland's defence was the best part by a country mile. So I mean that just shows he's in tune with you. Peter, flipping over to Wales, obviously not coming into the match. Certainly I felt I'd have been shocked if Ireland didn't win and didn't win well. I mean, there was an awful lot of emphasis on the 7 or 8 British and Irish Lions that Wales are missing. And let's be honest, any team that loses Alan Wynne-Jones, Ken Owens, Tipperick, Faletau, John Davis, George North, Lee Halfpenny, they're going to struggle. But there must be an element in Wales. All those guys, brilliant players. A lot of them are in their sort of early to mid-30s. Then you see what happened in Cork. The Welsh under-20s played Ireland, and Ireland put 54 points on them. You see the districts seem to be in disarray in Wales at the moment. And, in times past, we saw fellas, once they got into Welsh camp, they sort of grew 10 foot taller. They put on the red jersey and they were just like men possessed. But I think, when you're not performing week in, week out, and it's kind of year on year that nothing is happening in your provincial teams, it has to have a long-term effect. Have we reached that point now with Welsh Rugby?
Absolutely. There was an uncanny similarity, Donal, between what happened last weekend and what happened on the very same weekend 20 years ago. 20 years ago, Ireland A beat their Welsh counterparts in Cork 8-1, 55-22. And the next day, the Six Nations game, Wales lost 54-10. And the Welsh management would have known well about that because 2 of those members were in that team, Martin Williams in the back row, Stephen Jones at standoff. Again, that was, I think, 6-1, and it probably could have been 6-0 last weekend. I think when you look at the way Irish rugby is run, and there is a unity of purpose, It's easier, of course, when the IRFU owns and employs everybody, unlike in Wales. In Wales, agreement is a word that they find very difficult to understand. The regions are all pulling in one direction, the Welsh Rugby Union in another. In defence of the regions, which isn't always the most popular thing to do, I would say that there has been an unhealthy emphasis on Team Wales. This goes back 10, 12 years to where everything seemed to be going into Team Wales. And nobody really had enough vision, in my humble opinion, to say, hang on a minute, you know, we've got to water the vine here, because where does the next generation come from? And you've just made reference to what happened to the under-20s in Musgrave Park last Friday night. I mean, 53-5. The cupboard, I mean, old Mother Hubbard's was jam full of goodies compared to the state of Welsh rugby here. And I think that, I mean, you mentioned Jonathan Davis, Donald, who's been marvellous, you know, nearly 100 caps, but Jonathan Davis on current form is not worth his place. Then you mentioned Alan Wynne-Jones, 36, Ken Owens, 35, Talupi Faletau, who was hardly ever injured when he played in Wales. Now he's had a lot of injury, hasn't played since the Lions tour. Is he the player that he was? And how do you replace these players? And the only shining light from a Welsh perspective is Taine Basham, the open side. And I thought the most telling moment of the whole thing on Saturday at the Viva was early in the game, around about 15, 18 minutes, when there was an exasperated Josh Adams, all right, admittedly, you know, a high-class wing playing at outside centre. And he was like this, utter bewilderment. You know, we know what's coming, but we don't know where it's coming from. I mean, what do we do? And in a way, that's not so much an indictment of Wales. It's meant more as a compliment to what Ireland were doing. And again, maybe Scott would be interested in this, would know far more about it than I do. But I thought what was terribly revealing after the All Blacks game last November was the All Black reaction. Donald, you well know when our teams go to the Southern Hemisphere at the end of our season and we get pasted, somebody will always say, well, it's been a long season. We're very tired. We'll see what happens at the World Cup. The All Blacks, to their credit, there was no hiding behind that. If you remember, I saw the Dane Coles interview, and he looked like a man who was shocked at the manner of the defeat. And he was basically saying, we couldn't live with their intensity. And unless we can fix that, we're not going to have much of a chance of regaining the World Cup. And the skipper was exactly the same, you know, sort of saying, we feel the pain and we will keep this pain until next July when we play Ireland again. So I think they were genuinely taken aback at how good Ireland were.
Yeah, and I'm quite sure, look, Scott, I'd be interested in your comments in that 3-test series next June before we finish. But I want to park last week's game because we you know, what a match we have over the weekend, Ireland-France. But before I do so, just one comment on England, Jacko. Eddie Jones seems to be getting 2 barrels from right, left and centre. English selection seems to be all over the place. I mean, they're still looking for a centre combination to replace Will Greenwood and Mike Tyndall since the 2003 World Cup.
They are, and they put a lot of store on Manu Tuilagi, but sadly Tuilagi has been more injured than he's been fit. I mean, he's on his way back. Played at the weekend, so they couldn't maybe get him back quick enough. As you've said, Donald, he's been roundly criticised for taking Marcus Smith off when he did. Now, it's easy to view that through the prism of their inability to close the game out. But I think George Ford touched the ball once in open play in the 13 or 14 minutes that was left to him. So it wasn't so much, I don't think, the change at standoff that cost them the game. It was just their inability to hold on to what they had. You know, should they have given that long range kick to Daly, could have made it 20-all. There would have been then time perhaps for another opportunity. But yeah, I mean, England, when you think of what they've got, and they did have massive disruption, but their resources are such that you'd expect them something an awful lot better. I think it's 5th time in 6 seasons that they've started off by losing. Having said that, England at Twickenham will is still a pretty formidable match, isn't it, for anybody?
Absolutely. And Raj, I'm interested in your take in terms of Marcus Smith, George Ford. Obviously, Eddie Jones had left him out of the English squad and then was forced to bring him back in. But I think you'll remember a young boy making his debut in green who was called ashore with about 20 minutes to go in a number of games early on. So I think you might appreciate where England were coming from. But what was your take on that? Because it's attracted a huge amount of comment.
Yeah, it's very interesting from a coaching point of view what you do, but I just think that Marcus Smith's time is now. I don't think it's the future. I think he has over 100 and odd appearances for Harlequins. He's kind of, I think, refined his game at club level. What we've seen from him in an England jersey is that he's more than capable of stepping up, and I think probably thriving in a white jersey. I really think that this guy is very, very special. You look at the acceleration for that try that he scored. Very few people will have the timing, I suppose, and the vision to kind of pick that moment to go in unscathed. A lot of people may have to break a tackle in that situation, but his, I think, elusiveness and his capacity to see space is a few seconds ahead of a lot of people. You could understand what they were trying to do. I would say, for me, that change is a logical change. If it's Farrell for Smith, not Ford for Smith. I don't think Ford gets the same reaction from his players or from the opposition. I think if someone like Farrell is coming on to replace Smith, I think that's an area of, okay, we got the daddy here looking after the young pretender in that regard. But for me, I thought Smith was up and running. He was going. And there was probably a lot in what you said in the previous discussion. I was in, I think, was it Yokohama for that semi-final of England?
Yes, yeah.
So that was a day where English rugby dismantled New Zealand. It was fascinating to be in the ground to watch what happened. The English back row, I think the tempo of the English game, the wit they put in the game, I thought it spoke volumes for what was good in English rugby. We're obviously very quick in Ireland to criticise our near neighbours, but being in the ground live and watching that performance, it kind of spooked me and shocked me a bit to go, okay, this is where New Zealand are good and they're at their best in a Rugby World Cup semi-final, but there was only one team on the park, and England were hugely deserving victors on that occasion. To come up with the centre combination, I think, yeah, Tuilagi will definitely have a role, but it'll be interesting. I would say, Smith, Farrell, Tuilagi, Slade. They have seriously good players, so I wouldn't be too worried for them yet.
Yeah, but look, we won't be crying too much for them anyway. And fair dues to Scotland for winning. Scotty, Raj has always painted you as the kind of the glass half full kind of guy, the guy who's always looking to bring on the younger guys. What was your take on England-Scotland? Marcus Smith is a young guy who started throwing things up over here in the Gallagher Premiership. But on the flip side then in Scotland, I thought when the game, I didn't think Scotland played overly well. They were in trouble for long periods of the game. But in the last quarter, when the game was there to be won, I thought Finn Russell just grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck. Just what was your view on it from down under?
Oh, look, every time I watch Marcus Smith play, I feel like I'm watching Richie Mo'unga. As you said, the acceleration that he's got, just the ability to beat someone with his feet 2 meters beforehand, puts them on their heels, just sleight of hand, the vision. So he's very, very special. It's great, he can bring a new generation of England rugby through just with the way he plays and sees the game. It's quite cool too because I like him. He's got his own little characteristics. He's got a little flick of his hair. He's got a little bit of swag, and I quite like that. I know he's bringing himself on the field. That's probably the key. But I think Eddie would have liked that last 20 minutes back again. In reflection time as a coach, sometimes you make the calls and you realise that you wish you could have wound that back. there's no doubt that he had a lot of the momentum, and he took, that key player off. It's quite interesting. I just think Scotland held tough and won those couple of key moments. And I think the crowd and a couple of calls, the ref sort of went their way, and that was a game done. So game of moments.
Yeah, but so often in Six Nations games, they turn on very small margins. I mean, the Cohen-Dickey thing. I mean, when you have your two hands in the air, I mean, even if you make
volleyball,
yeah, I mean, if you have two hands in the air, it's easier to catch the ball, or at least in the act of catching it. If you drop it, it's a knock on, it's a scrum. I mean, with all the professionalism, all the preparation, there's times that I think modern players don't even know what the laws of the game are.
It was unbelievable. Sorry, Donald, to interrupt you. Just as you said, like, Scott is looking for a point of difference in the fact that games hinging. Like, to be fair, it was a speculative kick at best. We all in agreement on that. It was half a Gary Owen, half a cross kick. Like, for England to give up a yellow card and a penalty try off and on Hail Mary ball in the air, like, they were licking their lips. It could not have worked out any better, because for me, the Scottish winger had no eyes on the ball. He had little interest in getting that ball. It could have bounced anywhere, and then for them to end up with yellow card, penalty try, taking the lead, it was like, oh, we've won the lotto here. Let's get back to halfway. Brilliant.
Yeah, it was an incredible moment. I just want to focus a little bit. We won't go into France and Italy. We know France weren't at their best. They had 12 players had to leave camp because of COVID issues. I know Sean Edwards was talking about the very little preparation time on the pitch. Scott, just, for somebody, you were enthralled by France when you lived there. You mentioned earlier on some of your kids have French names because they were born in the south of France. Ireland and France beat New Zealand in November. We all know New Zealand at the end of a very long season. France, if we're honest, were even more impressive in their defeat of New Zealand than Ireland were. What's your take on French rugby at the moment, and where do you see them 18 months out from the World Cup?
Oh, they're in high spirits. Obviously, the under 20s team that did well probably 4 or 5 years ago won the World Cups they've come through, and it's quite interesting, the cohesion model that a lot of those guys that played together now are playing in the national team. And what Peter was saying before, you haven't got that at the moment heavy with Wales, and you can see a lot. They got depth in a lot of positions. Ronan will know that from coaching there, that whereas before a lot of foreigners would have taken a lot of the depth away, but now, they go 3 or 4 deep and 10, and you've got the best 9 in the world. You've got powerful backs. The way they play, they're still French style. They've got a little bit of order, but they prefer to play in chaos. They prefer to offload and come in the corner, and it's hard to defend them. You don't actually sort of know. I don't know if they know they're doing what they're doing sometimes, but they just play with so much freedom. When you get a confident French team like that, and this good set piece, good charismatic young players playing at home, it's set up beautifully for them.
Yeah, they're in a good place. And Peter, you've been watching French rugby for a long time. I mean, for 20 years there, they kind of lost the plot in France. The clubs were dominant. The national team, players were coming in almost flogged to death. They haven't won a Six Nations since 2010. I mean, it's incredible when you look at the strength and depth. I think Laporte, with the World Cup in mind, they're changing the number of players, French qualified players who have to be available for every matchday squad in the top 14. There's been a revolution in French rugby. And, as neutrals, if you take out our Irish interest, I've always loved French rugby. I was on the receiving end of many a good hammering in the old Parc de France when Blanco and Sella and the rest of them were going ballistic. They're getting back to that point, but with structure, organisation, and maybe discipline is about the only thing they're missing at the moment.
I remember, Donald, 20 years ago going there with Ireland on a Grand Slam under Keith Wood. And I think it was, 44-5. And yes, and I think that the biggest single blow to the Six Nations has been the fact that France have gone AWOL for so long, and that they were not only non-contenders, but a lot of their rugby was pretty grim to watch, wasn't it? It was almost as if they'd become obsessed with, we must be like les Anglais, we must have this discipline, and we can't do this, and we can't think outside the box. And I think their rugby was pretty dire to watch for a very long time. Not now, of course, and it's wonderful to see them back. I think, while I think that the Irish front five is the best in the world, and it's so good that you could now make out a case, I guess, for a change in one of those second row positions. You could make out a case for Ian Henderson coming back instead of Tadhg Byrne.
Tadhg Byrne, yeah.
And you think, hang on a minute, that's sacrilege. You can't say that given the way Byrne played last weekend. But I think that's the kind of riches that Ireland have in certain departments. Having said that, I think Wokey and Paul Willemse, I think they are absolutely brilliant. Wokey in particular, I think, is a phenomenal player. Does everything at high speed, supreme athlete, does the hard stuff. But having said that, Donal, and I know every game is different, but Ireland were a cut above anything else for those first round matches.
Yeah, and look, you mentioned the second row in particular. Obviously, I'm interested in the French, Raj. They go with this kind of detractor, and they go with the hybrid. I mean, the hybrid has been Wacky or Leroux, who I think is injured, is he?
I think there's talk of him coming back in potentially this week.
Is there? Yeah, but you've Willemse and Tau Fafanoa, who between them I think are about 48 stone. So it's just unbelievable. Tell us the mood in France. Obviously, last week, I think they weren't at their best. But immediately after the game, I saw an interview with Sean Edwards, and there was smoke coming out his ears. He was already focused on Ireland. Personally, I think it's bad news that they didn't play anywhere near their capacity. The halfbacks who've been outstanding for Toulouse, as you know well, we know Dupont and both Entomac, they had COVID. They looked a bit off the pace. Where do you think they are, or was Saturday or last Sunday's performance, was that a kind of a means to win? And there was also talk in France that they actually trained the team very hard. They were away with the Foreign Legion, almost, preparing for the Irish game. Where do you see, where exactly are they?
No, I think the two lads have summed it up well in the fact that they actually do put a huge emphasis on disorder, unstructured play, chaos, coming alive, and that. You look, I think, perfect example of them probably, like, for opposition defenses to set up the Gregory Aldred offload to Gabon Villiers, like that's just them just playing freely because they just kind of accelerate their game. But like it's going to be fascinating, I suppose, the clash of styles this weekend, and the fact that you'll have a really organised attack framework against a completely chaotic jeu de bout, express yourself in the Frenchies, just going for it, but actually putting tempo and speed on their game. But they actually train that. They train that a lot, in the fact that those scenarios would be the first time they've seen them. But what could be different is the personnel with the ball, because they all have a license to offload whenever they want. And Peter's point is interesting for me too, in the fact that they're probably frustrated with foreigners coming in, and the fact that, we're never going to be disciplined like the English or the Anglo-Saxon, the Irish people, but that really doesn't interest us. I think the French, they've their identity back. They know what they stand for. They know how they want to play. Entomac and Dupont have had, this will be their third game, so they've kind of played Toulouse, Racing together. They played France, Italy together, and as a halfback combination, they are very, very exciting and very good. I think Dante in the midfield will be a loss, but as you know, it's up front where it will be decided. But to be fair, the weather conditions on Sunday were horrendous, Donal. I think like when it's raining in soccer or in football, it's kind of the same game. Raining in rugby nowadays with kind of line speed and defenses, and to actually catching the ball, it's quite difficult. It makes the game very, very different. But But I had a look at the weather forecast. I think Saturday in Paris is meant to be sunny.
But yeah, my wife is going to Paris with me. She has the forecast out. She's not going to the match. It's beautiful Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that's all that matters. I tell you, you've come a long way from Model Farm Road. Jus Debout.
Jus Debout is just staying. Jus Debout is the French, as Reza will tell you, they don't like rucking. Ireland are fascinated with the ruck. The French, they don't want to fall. So keep the ball alive. Keep it upright. Run. Have a bit of profondeur, which means depth, and coming on to the ball. And you look at that, perfect for the Villiers try, but there's that in examples all the time. So they love unstructured player, while I suppose with the Anglo-Saxon model, where you see with Ireland now, all of this is organised in the fact when they go to width, it's probably option A, B, and C. When the French go to width, it's just play. Crazy breakneck speed, massive boys, Antonio, Tamafina, Aldridge, just hitting lines, the two nearest to them, trying to get to them so that they'll stay upright and they play the ball out of the tackle. And that means that they're kind of their speed of the pass will always beat the speed of the man, because how they see it, and it's scientifically proven. If you want to pass the ball across the pitch, that's faster actually than.
Just taking up on that point there, Scott, just how big an influence had French rugby on you when you played out there, and the element that you brought back to New Zealand, and where do you see this French team now? Where do you think Ireland could be in trouble on Saturday?
It was great for me going to France to play because I was Crusaderified. So we won multiple championships. I played there for 8 years. The way we were coached by Wayne Smith and Steve Henson, Robbie Deans, amazing, probably the 3 best coaches in world rugby over a period of time. Yeah. So I had them with their methods, and then went over and had a coach called Olivier Cessé, Le Tigre. They called him a tiger, and we had one coach for the forwards and backs. So we had 3 or 4 coaches home. He did everything. And so the trainings were, the forwards would be in the gym and the backs would swap over roles, and we'd come back out on the field, and he'd do both and then do the team together. But what he did, he taught us a style. It was more around the philosophy of the game. And he said, "Jus de pou," which just means to boot, stand up, stay in the air. And it made you look. So you're always looking for the option, whereas you're looking for the contact or looking for space around you. But we trained differently. We played differently. The maul was used as a combat, as war. The identity of Pepignon, it started Margerat with the crowd of scoring a maul try was just as much as scoring a 100-meter try. They just the passion around it. So what I got is I understood the way the Crusaders do it was just one way. The way the France were doing it was their way. So you need the diversity, the understanding of what there are different styles, there are different ways to play. It's just different. It's not right or wrong. So with my coaching style and philosophy, we actually train chaos. We use those words. We train order, so we've got structure, but we've got the ability to use our sense and game understanding as much as being highly organised. And that's what we talked about when we started back with Ireland, didn't we? The ability with Ireland to have a little bit more ability to just to play what's in front of them, but also be highly structured.
Yeah, and just if I could get your take on, and that's the way France and Ireland are playing out of the tackle, keeping the ball alive, kicking that little bit less. But yet, I have this feeling on Saturday, you go back to the French, like the scrum is still a massive element in the French game. You can see it when their reserve front row came on last Sunday. They wanted to punish Italy first. The French line-out maul, no, I think it could have been better organised. It was a bit all over the place, to be honest, last weekend, but I expect it to be better. With all the flair and all the ability to keep the ball alive, I think that this set-piece battle on Saturday could be huge, scrum in particular. Like, if you're the French, I could just see the likes of Sean Edwards telling the likes of Cyril Boy and Marchand, Ronan's Utonio, who's about another 24 stoner, you know, everyone's talking about Furlong, Kelleher, and Porter. They're the best front row in the world. I can see France really having a go off them in the scrum.
Yeah. And like I was saying before, in the maul and the mindset, you know, that's the Kombala war, that they love that stuff. They always say to me, you never have a foreign coach, or maybe South African, I should say that, coach a French scrum, because they don't actually ever get their mindset to it. You can go anywhere as long as it's forward. That's what was. I think Bernard Guter said it to us, our captain and one of the coaches. I was like, okay, mate, that's pretty simple, and and that's it. That's what they do, and it might not be.
And normally, well, certainly in the old days, by whatever means was necessary to go forward, but they had to.
That's it.
Kick it.
That's the point. And that's the point, and that's where they love it, and that's a great thing around the French and the contrast of styles, and you know, it's a massive game. Or anyone that loves rugby will be watching this weekend. I know how important this game is, and you know, down the Southern Hemisphere, we understand the quality of the game. As I started at the top of this podcast, was the quality of all that rugby. You know, it is definitely improved, because their mindset to the game's changed and the skill set that's gone with it, the ability to play. It's exciting for world rugby.
Yeah, it certainly is. And, you know, when you look at it, Jacko, I mean, part of that whole transformation, the management group that France have now, Fabien Galtier, we spoke about Sean Edwards, but I think Rafa Ibanez as well, a former French captain, played under Edwards and Warren Gatland, in that very good Wasps team that Roger would have come up against. They've combined the old traditional values that Scott is alluding to within the French, but they've put a bit of organisation, sophistication, pride. It's clear from the crowd, the way La Marseillaise was sang last Sunday, you could see the French are behind this team. So is Saturday then a must-win for this French team, given that they're in their third season as a management group and they've finished second in the last few seasons?
Absolutely. Just mentioning Rafael Ibanez, Donald, I knew him reasonably well during his time at Wasps. A real warrior. I know that's a phrase that we chuck about a little bit carelessly, with abandon at times, but really does apply in his case. And fascinating to listen to Scott about the front rows. You know, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in the French bunker when they get round to talk about Tadhg Furlong or Andrew Porter. I mean, I am the last man in the world to talk about the mechanics of the front row, but I know that it is extremely difficult to become outstanding at tight head and then be equally outstanding on the other side of the scrum. And if you go back, Donald, to people like Jason Leonard, Leonard was one of the very few who mastered that. But Andrew Porter's done it, in a matter of months. I mean, he was loose head reserve at the end of the Six Nations last year. And he's now gone to be, there is nothing this guy can't do. And what will the French say about Furlong? You know, he's like Nureyev in 18 stone and size 11 boots. It's so I would have thought that would take up an awful lot of their time. But yeah, I suppose given that the game is in the Stade de France, they'll say we have to make home advantage tell. And I think it's also, I mean, history sometimes gives you a bit of a clue, doesn't it? Since that famous game in 72, you know, when Ireland were denied the chance of a Grand Slam because of the Bloody Sunday in my hometown and things that happened after that. Since then, only 4 Irish wins, and yet they've all been this century, you know, go back to Brian O'Driscoll's hat trick and the more recent wins. So I would say, if anything, that France would be even more worried about Ireland than Ireland are about France. I don't know what Ronan thinks.
Peter, I'll just jump in there. You're just talking about props playing both sides. You know, Ronan could kick off both feet, though, eh? at the same time. You try that.
Yeah.
No.
And he still stood out.
Well, the thing about Porter was actually a loose head underage, played Ireland 20s at underage as a loose head prop. He actually transferred from loose head to tight head, which is a more difficult transition. When you're tight head, you're pinged in between the opposition loose head and the hooker. So it's a massively different shift to go from loose head to tight head. And he mastered that. So I think the actual transition back to the loose head side is obviously, I'd say it was almost redeeming for him, because we know how good he is with ball in hand, and it just gave him that slight little bit more freedom. But it's a massive luxury for Ireland to have. There's no doubt about that. Raj, I mean, Peter has brought up 2000. I mean, that was an iconic day for all of us, out of nothing. You know, for you as a young lad to go to the Stade de France, Ireland hadn't won there since, was it 69, Ray McLaughlin's famous try.
72, Donal, I think. 72 under Tommy Kiernan.
Yeah. And but Raj, just you know, and I'm interested in your take from a specific angle on Saturday, but just to put it in context, how sweet it is to have a win in Paris on your CV as an Irish international. I played in the Parc des Princes 5 times for Ireland, never won there. Like the French in the old days, they were such a different animal in Paris than when you played them in Dublin. It was just poles apart. But just your take on that day in 2000 before we start talking about next Saturday.
I actually, it was great, but I don't remember too much about it, Donal. It's weird. You kind of, when you're young, probably think it's going to be normal because you're fearless. You're going to Paris. You're obviously the anti-special and you respect the history, but I think the mindset you had created in that team with 5 new caps was kind of, okay, this is our time. Let's go and win.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised you don't remember a whole lot about it, because I remember trying to drag you out of bed on the Sunday morning to get you on the bus, to get you back to Cork.
That
was more difficult.
Thing. You're allowed to have a few pints when you win, Donal. That's all true, isn't it?
You certainly are.
Well, I think just this weekend, I think, as you said it, like it'll be a massive belt for France if they don't do the business. I think the fact that it's at home, the World Cup is around the corner. As you said, 2010 was the last time they've won the Six Nations, so they've kind of made this a little bit of a stepping stone on the road to hopefully being victorious in the Rugby World Cup. But Ireland are coming in, you know what I mean, with a great performance under their belt, but home advantage is hugely important. So, and from a France's point of view, that probably heaps the pressure more on them. So the first 10 minutes is going to be crucial, absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
And can I ask? Sorry, Scotty. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting how disciplined France can be. Like that's the part, because this is like a top echelon test match. How disciplined and how long can they keep their heads for in their structures, like defensively? Because Ireland likes to hold the ball and they're great at the breakdown. And if they can get impatient or they give a couple of penalties away and momentum goes, the French team will potentially struggle as they have in the past. I'd just like to see the maturity of the squad, how much they trust Sean Edwards' defensive structures. And this is what they want to learn about themselves. Because World Cups are normally won on defence. And they're going to do a lot this week. So that's the exciting part. That's what I'll be watching. We know the French can score, but can they defend and keep disciplined?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because what I was going to ask you, Raj, given the way that Ireland are playing, given the sort of the way they play with the 2 lines of attack, defenders have to make decisions on the spur of the moment. They've got to read what's in front of them. So put yourself in Sean Edwards' shoes as the French defence coach this week. How do you prepare to play against this Irish team from a defensive point of view?
Yeah, I think also too, you're probably seeing Ireland winning an awful lot of collisions in the last 6 months. It could be very different on Saturday. You got big men in blue jerseys that hit hard. So it's rugby is very, very different on the front foot. Very easy for your halfbacks. But It'll probably be starting from zero with this game, and the fact that there'll be carnage at the start of the game or along the gain line. You know what I mean? Jos van der Fleer picks brilliant lines, but with the physics, if Winnie Antonio carries the ball, he's going to make more of a dent on the gain line than van der Fleer is. Because sometimes there just isn't space. Because in the first 10 minutes, you won't have anyone fatiguing. It'll be after that, as Razor said, can Ireland continue with that tempo? And will France kind of make ill-disciplined decisions, which will result in either 3 points or scores, I think. But you don't underestimate what we've seen France in the Stade de France so far, is that they've been a very difficult team to break down. New Zealand tried it at times, got a little bit of joy, but you referenced early in the conversation that probably France's performance was more impressive than Ireland's when we look at those performances.
The New Zealand game.
Yeah, but now we're a few months later. COVID has hit France. The timing of the halfbacks, I think something that has to be said is that Jalibert not there for the last 30 minutes is a huge loss to France. He's someone that creates carnage in the opposition defence, just his acceleration. Very few people in world rugby have it, and I think he will most definitely be a loss. But I think where Sean Edwards will have confidence in the fact that getting their, I suppose, line speed, and the fact that they have, I suppose, very good defenders, that makes, if the ball is, Ireland have been very, very impressive because of their ruck speed, but if that slows by an extra second on average, it's a very, very different game. You got two kind of, I suppose, phases to make a dent on the opposition defence. Otherwise, you got to kick the ball in modern rugby, Donal, and the fact that it's easy to play when you're winning collisions and on the front foot, but France have been very good in that regard so far.
Yeah, they certainly have. And flip it back to Ireland, Jacko, a luxury of sorts when you consider Ian Henderson is available, we think. Robbie Henshaw, who played the 3 tests for the Lions, the player of the season last year. Do you stick or twist in selection, or do you bolster your bench by keeping your team and putting Henderson and Robbie on the bench?
Good question. The old adage is never change a winning team, but as Ronan has said, the extra physicality which Ireland are going to encounter on Saturday, does that then mean that you say, right, we go for a bit more physicality and we pick Ian Henderson, assuming, of course, that Henderson is fully fit? I'm a big Henderson fan. I think he's a terrific player. I thought, he was the kind of natural successor to Paul O'Connell in so many respects. And Clive Woodward, who let's be fair, is still the only European coach to actually win the World Cup. He always said that going to a World Cup, you really had to have 30 players who were interchangeable. In other words, you had 2 15s who were just about as good as each other, and the All Blacks have shown the value of that over the decades. I think Ireland probably now are closer to that than at any stage they've been. You mentioned Henshaw didn't play, Henderson didn't play, and there's so many other outstanding players on the fringes. So I'm not saying they've got 2 15s who will go and play France, but they're getting there. And last weekend, Donald, prior to last weekend, I would have thought France will make home advantage tell. France will beat Ireland, but I've now flipped it. I think Ireland was so good that I really do think that they'll carry on winning on Saturday. Not be the first time that'll be proved and made look foolish, but there you go.
Well, when you're at it for 100 years, you're bound to be wrong.
You're bound to get some right, yes.
Scotty, just before I take your kind of take on the match, who you think is going to win it, it's clear the influence that playing in France has on you. It kind of it shines out through you when you speak. You have come out in the past and said it's an ambition of yours to coach in Europe, be it in France or in the UK or Ireland. There is a vacancy in Munster. I don't know, did you notice it in the newspapers or anything? Have you any interest in coaching up in this part of the world, either now or at some stage in the future?
Yeah, I'll head up that way. I did have talked to Mick O'Driscoll, my old mate, about it. But look, the timing's not right. I've got a couple more years in down here in New Zealand. So yeah, look, it's quite unique. Donal and Peter Jackson. We got Peter Jackson with a famous movie writer called Peter Jackson. You two remind me of like your Wikipedia guys, man. You guys, your knowledge is unbelievable. You're a stat coming out of here, like it's incredible.
I think it'd be a few people might disagree with you, Scott, but very kind of you to say so.
Fake news, but that it's sorry, I don't even know where I started there. What was I talking about?
You were talking about the desire to come.
Sorry. Yeah, I'd love to. It's just we've got Jane and I've got 3 young boys that, the youngest is 13. So we're just trying to make sure that we give them every opportunity to grow up in New Zealand, and opportunity as coaches. Like it's not very often you get to choose, do you, Ronan, exactly where you want to go and what you want to be, and and what club we want to have. But fortunately, I've coached a team that I played for and really passionate about with the Crusaders. So paid them for 8 years, and now I'm my 6th year coaching them. And that's unique. You look anywhere, no one hardly gets to do that. So to leave some of this place is, it'd be really tough to do. But I'm also ambitious. I want to change how people think about coaching, how they do coach, and I'll have to do that to go to the Northern Hemisphere. I'll have to challenge myself, get out of my comfort zone, understand how I can add to the current culture that is there, do something on the big stage. Yeah.
Yeah, but unfortunately, you don't see that happening in the short to medium term.
The big one will be 24 rugby after the Rugby World Cup. See what happens here with the All Blacks. Do I coach another club or do I go and coach a country? Why would I coach another club? Like I've got the best club in the world, I believe. What would keep me here would be a World Cup challenge. I'd love to take the Crusaders and have a crack at La Rochelle, or whoever wins Europe. I'd love to be able to go if it is Leinster or, if it is Toulouse. I'd love to be able to go and truly find out the styles of rugby, and with 12 All Blacks, we could run out 13 All Blacks and a big game, and that's what people want to see. That's what people want to know, and I want to know about myself as a coach as well. If coach in one of those pinnacle games. So the next one, what really intrigues me, is Test match rugby. Can bring the best out of people, and I'd love to do it for New Zealand, but if it meant I have to go to another country before I came back to New Zealand, I'd do it for sure.
Oh, well, look, that's brilliant, and I can understand that. But look, then, just finally, your take on Saturday, Ireland or France for you?
If, like I mentioned before, if France are disciplined, I think their passion will get them home. If Ireland control the ball, good luck to France.
Yeah, Raj, you're in the backyard down there. Although I understand you're up in the Pyrenees at the moment doing a bit of skiing or something. Will you be in?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to rob a bank with you, Donal, would I?
You weren't. Are you in the stand to France on Saturday?
I don't know. I probably have. It depends. I leave here tomorrow and get back to work. We're not going through a great patch at the minute, so this is good to clear the head, get a plan for. There's 10 games left in top 14. Europe is only starting, so it feels like I think there's about 45% of the season left in France. So just got to get the vision right now and the fact where we're going. And
just when you're talking, sorry, about just about the top 14, and before I get your final take on Saturday, that bizarre end to your game against Biarritz last weekend. I mean, it's gone viral on YouTube. 2 balls on the field, an attacking 5-meter scrum, 2 outcomes. You might just explain what happened.
Oh, but I think Peter would know this better. This is par for the course. It happens nearly in every round of top 14. There's one Hail Mary story, and unfortunately it was us this weekend. It was a line out near the end of the game, or in extra time, in additional time, and they went for a line out drive, and I think some member of the crowd kicked in a ball on the pitch. So the course of the ball came in kind of underneath the line out drive and came out our side. So 3 of the players dived on the ball. Carbarlo kicked it out and started celebrating, thinking the game was over. And the Barrett's hooker peeled off and scored in the corner with the match ball. So there was bedlam. So the game was restarted with a scrum for us. And essentially it was, well, as I know, it wasn't game over because we got penalised at the scrum. So penalty.
Oh.
It's even though we kind of called Channel 1, but we still got pinged because literally it was over. So you just literally 9 kicks the ball out. We got penalised at scrum time, and then 3 minutes later they scored, win the game. So good way coming up to
only in France.
Pardon?
Mm-hmm. Only in France. Can't script that.
You've got to have a look at it straight away, Scott. It's while we're watching, unless you're in Roger's boots. Anyway, listen, sorry for inflicting that little bit of pain. Just your final views on Saturday. France, is there an element, just one question before you give your verdict. With Entimac, like you were a kicker all your life, it was part and parcel of your psyche for a game. The fact that Jaminet is now doing the place kicking for France, that's an area of responsibility that Entimac seems, has lost. Does that impact on a 10 and your whole mindset going into a game?
Yeah, it does, most definitely. Yeah, I think because all 10s are competitors, they want that responsibility, they love it, they live for it. But I think I was blown away by one statistic. I'm not really that into statistics, but Jaminet, I think up to the first round of the Six Nations, had kicked 34 from 37. So you're talking about, you mean discipline or the importance of keeping the scoreboard ticking at the top echelon of rugby. You mean that's exactly what you look for when you're creating a team or how you're going to get over the line. It's phenomenal statistics. So as long as he keeps doing that, he's a beautiful kicker. The ball actually in his line kicking is could be a big factor at the weekend. He kind of frequently 5 or 6 times in the game he gets touches of over 50-60 meters, which hugely, I suppose, adds to France's set piece mentality also.
And doesn't it epitomise where French rugby is in terms of, when we talk about strength and depth? He was in the Pro D2, I think, with Perpignan, and they brought him to Australia last summer, and he was a revelation. So, it just shows you these guys, the amount of talent they've scattered all over the country. The problem for the rest of us is they're now beginning to find them and to pick them. So, look, we leave the final word with you as always, Raj.
Saturday, what's going to happen? Give it to Razor. He's our guest.
He's given us his verdict on the match. You've got to listen to what the other fellas.
I agree. I just think France at home, I think will be very, very difficult to beat. But obviously on current form, as Peter said, if there's a team to do it, I think Ireland are probably really, really excited about this game. While in the past, maybe a lot of mindset with Irish teams going there would be we gotta stop France playing. But I think Ireland will actually look to flip that in its head, and I think Ireland are going to really attack this game, and they'll have a few special players up their sleeve to look to pull apart the French team. Because as you say, Donal, interestingly about Jaminet, he was found and I suppose his bank of confidence is deep, but it's nowhere near as deep as I suppose as the relationships created among the Irish team. They've been playing with each other for a long period of time now, and building towards this World Cup, I think this is a crucial game that they look to tick off on their way.
Yeah, interesting. Listen, lads, it's been fascinating. Scott, really appreciate you staying up late at night and giving us your thoughts. It's been fascinating. Best of luck in the new Super Rugby season that's starting in the next week or two. We'll be watching you with interest from this side of the world. Peter, brilliant as always. So, lads, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the weekend.